Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Hit the like button, and let's begin this story. Thomas was 16 years old when he became the sole protector of 3 lives that depended entirely on him. His parents had died in a house fire 6 months earlier, a tragedy the authorities ruled accidental, though Thomas had always wondered about the timing. His father had been investigating financial irregularities at the factory where he worked, and 3 days before the fire, he'd told Thomas he'd found something that could change everything. Then came the night when Thomas woke to smoke and flames, managing to pull his younger siblings through a window before the entire structure collapsed. Now Thomas stood as guardian to Emma, age 12, Michael, age 9, and little Sophie, just 7 years old. The state had assigned them to the Riverside Group home on the outskirts of Portland, a sprawling facility that housed over 100 children in conditions that made Thomas's stomach turn. The building smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Meals were rationed so tightly that the younger children cried from hunger every night. But what terrified Thomas most were the overnight visitors. Well-dressed men and women who arrived after dark, walked through the dormitories with clipboard assessments, and left with children who were never seen again. The administrators called them special placement opportunities. Thomas called them what they were: sales transactions. He'd overheard the director, Mrs. Patricia Thornton, on the phone 2 nights earlier. Her office door had been slightly ajar, and Thomas had been walking past on his way to check on Sophie, who'd been having nightmares. "The older boy is problematic," Mrs. Thornton had said, her voice cold and businesslike. "He asks too many questions and keeps the younger ones too close. But the little girl, Sophie, blonde, compliant, photogenic, she'll fetch premium placement fees. I have a family in Montana interested. They're willing to pay extra for discretion." Thomas had felt his blood turn to ice. He knew exactly what discretion meant. No paperwork, no oversight, no way to ever find her again. That night, he made a decision that would change everything. They had to run, all 4 of them, together. Planning the escape took 2 weeks of careful observation. Thomas mapped the guard rotations, tested the security of various windows, and slowly accumulated supplies: crackers stolen from the cafeteria, a flashlight taken from the maintenance closet, a detailed road map he'd found in the trash. He told his siblings nothing until the night they left, knowing that children's faces revealed secrets adults could read. On a Tuesday night in late September, when autumn rain provided cover and the night supervisor was known to sleep heavily, Thomas woke his siblings at 2 in the morning. "We're leaving," he whispered, helping Sophie into her jacket. "We're going somewhere safe. But you have to be completely quiet. Can you do that?" 3 pairs of frightened eyes looked back at him, but all 3 nodded. They slipped through the second-floor bathroom window Thomas had loosened over several nights, descended a drain pipe to the courtyard, and climbed the perimeter fence using a maintenance ladder Thomas had positioned earlier. By the time they reached the main road, rain was falling steadily, washing away their footprints and making visibility nearly impossible. Thomas led them east, away from the city, toward the densely forested areas of the Columbia River Gorge. He had a vague plan: find temporary shelter, then figure out how to contact the one person who might help them. His father's former colleague, David Martinez, who'd promised at the funeral to look after the family if they ever needed anything. But Martinez lived 300 miles away in Sacramento, and Thomas had no phone, no money, and no way to reach him without risking detection. They walked through the night and into the morning, staying off main roads, moving through woods and farmland. By midday, Emma was limping from blisters, Michael was shivering despite his jacket, and Sophie could barely keep her eyes open. They needed shelter urgently. That's when Thomas saw it. Hidden deep in a ravine, almost completely obscured by decades of wild growth and fallen trees, was the rusted hulk of an old school bus. Only the roof and upper windows were visible, the rest buried beneath earth and vegetation, as if the ground itself had slowly swallowed it over years of abandonment. The bus was painted a faded yellow, the kind that had transported children to school in the 1970s or 80s. Vines had woven through broken windows. Moss covered the metal exterior. But to Thomas, it looked like salvation. "Stay here," he told his siblings, leaving them hidden behind a cluster of trees. He approached cautiously, checking for signs of recent human activity, footprints, trash, evidence of squatters or drug users. But there was nothing. The bus appeared completely forgotten, a relic from another era that time had left behind. Thomas climbed through a side emergency exit that hung partially open, dropping into the interior with a soft thud. Dust particles danced in beams of light, filtering through the overgrown windows. The seats had rotted away, leaving only metal frames. The dashboard was covered in decades of grime, but it was dry, protected, hidden. And then Thomas saw something that made his breath catch. In the very back of the bus, someone had created a living space. There were blankets neatly folded in a corner. Plastic containers held what looked like preserved food. A camping lantern sat on a makeshift shelf. Books were stacked carefully against the wall. This wasn't just an abandoned bus. Someone had turned it into a refuge. Thomas moved deeper into the space, his flashlight revealing more details. The books were children's books, illustrated stories, educational texts, adventure novels. The blankets were child-sized. There were drawings taped to the walls, crude but cheerful images of houses and families and sunshine. And then he found the metal box. It was hidden beneath a loose floor panel, secured with a simple combination lock that had rusted open over time. Inside were documents, photographs, and letters that would change everything Thomas understood about his family's tragedy. The first photograph showed a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. She was standing in front of this very bus, holding the hand of a small boy. On the back, someone had written, "Sarah and Jamie, 1987, our new home." The letters were addressed to someone named Rebecca. They were written by Sarah, and they told a story that made Thomas's hands shake as he read. Sarah had been a social worker investigating child trafficking operations in the Pacific Northwest. She discovered that several group homes and foster agencies were selling children to wealthy buyers, some for illegal adoptions, others for purposes the letters only hinted at darkly. She'd gathered evidence, prepared to go to authorities, but then received threats. Her supervisor had warned her to drop the investigation. She'd been followed. Her apartment had been broken into. So she'd run. She'd taken her nephew Jamie, whose parents had died and who'd been placed in one of the corrupt facilities, and she'd hidden him in this buried bus while she tried to find someone trustworthy enough to help. The last letter was dated January 15th, 1988. "Rebecca, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Please find Jamie. Please keep him safe. The people involved in this go higher than we imagined. I have evidence hidden in a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box 847. The key is buried beneath the third tree east of the bus entrance. Tell the truth. Save the others. I'm sorry I couldn't finish this. S." Thomas sat back, his mind racing. The letter was over 35 years old. Sarah had disappeared. But what had happened to Jamie? He searched the rest of the bus frantically, looking for more clues. That's when he found the second metal box, this one more recent, hidden in a different compartment. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 2010. The headline read, "Local advocate James Morrison continues fight against child trafficking." The article described a man who dedicated his life to reforming foster care systems and prosecuting those who exploited vulnerable children. The accompanying photo showed a man in his early 30s with serious eyes and a determined expression. Thomas recognized those eyes. They were the same eyes from the childhood photo of Jamie. Jamie had survived. He'd grown up, and he'd continued his aunt's mission. There was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the article. "To whoever finds this refuge, my name is James Morrison. This bus saved my life when I was 7 years old. My Aunt Sarah died protecting me, murdered by people who wanted to silence her investigation. I've spent my adult life continuing her work, but the networks she uncovered are still operating. If you found this place, you're probably running from the same system that tried to destroy me. There are supplies here to keep you safe. But more importantly, there are instructions for how to reach people who can help. In the hidden compartment behind the driver's seat, you'll find contact information for a network of advocates, lawyers, and safe houses. Use them. And when you're safe, help others like we've tried to help you. James Morrison, March 2023 inch. Thomas found the hidden compartment. Inside was exactly what Morrison had promised. A waterproof bag containing a prepaid phone with emergency numbers pre-programmed, cash, detailed instructions for reaching safe locations, and a list of names, lawyers, activists, journalists, and former victims who'd become protectors. David Martinez's name was on the list. For the first time since his parents' death, Thomas felt something beyond fear and desperation. He felt hope, but he also felt the crushing weight of what this discovery meant. The system that had killed Sarah was the same system that had taken his siblings. And if Mrs. Thornton's phone conversation meant what he thought it meant, they were planning to sell Sophie within days. Thomas climbed out of the bus and called his siblings over. They crowded into the hidden refuge, their eyes wide as they took in the unexpected sanctuary. "We're safe here," Thomas told them, though he knew safe was temporary. "And I found something that's going to help us." That night, by the light of the camping lantern, Thomas used the prepaid phone to call the first number on James Morrison's list. A woman answered on the second ring. "Sanctuary Network, this is Rachel." Thomas took a deep breath. "My name is Thomas. I found the buried bus. I have 3 siblings with me, and we're running from Riverside Group Home. They're trying to sell my 7-year-old sister. We need help." There was a pause. Then Rachel's voice returned, stronger and more urgent. "Thomas, stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't use that phone again until I contact you. Someone will reach you within 6 hours. Do you have enough supplies?" "Yes." "Good. You did the right thing by running. And you did the right thing by calling. We're going to help you. All of you." The line went silent. Thomas sat with his back against the wall of the bus. Sophie sleeping with her head on his lap, Emma and Michael huddled together under blankets. He looked at the drawings on the walls, the hopeful images of home and family that some other frightened child had created decades ago. He thought about Sarah, who died protecting her nephew, about James Morrison, who turned his trauma into a mission to save others, about his own father, who'd been investigating something dangerous enough to get him killed. The pattern was clear. The corruption ran deep, but so did the network of people fighting against it. 6 hours later, just as dawn broke over the ravine, Thomas heard the sound of careful footsteps approaching the bus. His body tensed, ready to grab his siblings and run. But the voice that called out was gentle and carried a code phrase Rachel had given him. "Thomas, my name is David Martinez. I'm here to bring you home." Thomas recognized the name immediately. His father's colleague, the one person his dad had trusted completely. He climbed out of the bus cautiously and found himself face to face with a man in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes that held both sadness and fierce determination. "Your father was my best friend," Martinez said quietly. "When he died, I suspected it wasn't an accident. I've been investigating on my own, but I couldn't find you kids after the state took you. Thank God James Morrison's network found you first." "You know about Morrison?" Thomas asked. "I know about the whole operation. I've been working with the Sanctuary Network for 3 years, ever since I discovered what your father had found. Evidence that the factory where we worked was a money laundering front for a child trafficking organization. Your dad died because he wouldn't let it go, and I've been continuing his investigation." Martinez looked at the buried bus with something like reverence. Sarah Morrison's refuge has saved more lives than anyone will ever know. James maintains it as a symbol, proof that even in the darkest circumstances, someone's always left a light on for those who need it. Over the next hours, Martinez explained the plan. The Sanctuary Network had been building a legal case against Mrs. Thornton and Riverside Group Home for months. Thomas's testimony, combined with evidence from other survivors and Morrison's decades of documentation, would finally bring down the network. But first, they needed to get the children somewhere completely safe. Martinez drove them to a secure location, a farm property owned by a retired judge who dedicated her life to protecting witnesses in cases against institutional abuse. There, Thomas and his siblings were given their first real home in 6 months. Warm beds, plentiful food, safety. And for the first time since the fire, Thomas allowed himself to cry. Within 2 weeks, federal investigators raided Riverside Group Home. Mrs. Thornton was arrested along with 8 staff members. Documents seized from her office revealed the full extent of the operation. Over 200 children had been placed through illegal channels over 15 years, generating millions in profits for the network. Thomas testified before a grand jury. His siblings were placed in the permanent care of David Martinez, who had already begun the process of formal adoption. The Montana family interested in Sophie turned out to be a front for a much darker operation, one that was dismantled as a direct result of the investigation Thomas's testimony triggered. James Morrison flew in from Seattle to meet Thomas personally. He was now 42, a respected advocate whose organization had helped rescue over 3,000 children from exploitation. When he walked into the safe house where Thomas was staying, the two of them stood looking at each other for a long moment. "You found the bus," Morrison said simply. "Your aunt saved us," Thomas replied. "Just like she saved you." Morrison smiled, though his eyes held old pain. Sarah believed that every child deserved someone willing to fight for them. She proved it by giving her life for mine. I've spent 35 years trying to honor that. He handed Thomas a folder. "These are scholarship applications. Full ride to any university you choose. When you're ready, the network takes care of its own." "I want to study law," Thomas said immediately. "I want to do what you do." Morrison nodded slowly. "Then you'll have all the training and support we can provide. But Thomas, take time to be a kid first. You've carried the weight of protecting your family through hell. Let someone else carry you for a while." That night, David Martinez sat with all 4 children in the living room of their new home. The house smelled of fresh paint and hope. Emma was reading to Sophie. Michael was building something with blocks. Thomas was helping Martinez prepare dinner. "Your father would be proud," Martinez said quietly. "He fought for the truth. You fought for your family. That's the same courage." "Did he know?" Thomas asked. "About the trafficking network?" He suspected. He'd found financial irregularities that pointed to something much bigger. He was about to go public when Martinez's voice caught. "I should have protected him better." "You protected us," Thomas said. "That's what matters now." 3 months later, Thomas stood before a congressional committee investigating institutional child abuse. At 17, he was one of the youngest witnesses ever to testify before Congress. His testimony, along with that of James Morrison and dozens of other survivors, led to sweeping reforms in the foster care system and the creation of a federal task force dedicated to combating child trafficking. But the moment that meant the most to Thomas came on an ordinary Tuesday evening, 6 months after their escape. The Martinez household had settled into comfortable routines. Homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on Fridays, Sunday morning pancakes. Sophie, now 8 and thriving in her new school, came running into Thomas's room with a drawing she'd made. It showed 5 figures holding hands in front of a house: Thomas, Emma, Michael, Sophie, and David Martinez. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "My family." Thomas hung the drawing on his wall, right next to a photograph James Morrison had given him. It showed a young Sarah Morrison standing in front of the buried bus in 1987, smiling with hope and determination. 2 generations, 2 refuges, countless lives saved because one woman had believed that children deserved protection, and one man had dedicated his life to continuing her mission. Thomas touched the photograph gently. "Thank you," he whispered. Outside his window, autumn rain fell softly, washing the world clean. Inside, his family was safe, his siblings were healing, and Thomas knew, with absolute certainty, that he would spend the rest of his life making sure no child ever felt as alone and terrified as he had felt that night they ran. The buried bus remained hidden in its ravine, maintained by the Sanctuary Network, as both memorial and active refuge. James Morrison visited it twice a year, leaving fresh supplies and updated contact information for the next desperate soul who might stumble upon it. Because the network Sarah Morrison started had proven one essential truth: there is always someone willing to fight for the powerless. There is always a light left burning in the darkness. There is always hope, even in the most desperate circumstances. And sometimes that hope comes in the most unexpected forms. A forgotten school bus buried in the earth, transformed by love and courage into a sanctuary that saves lives across generations.